Virtuous Men, a podcast devoted to sharing the...
Welcome everyone to part 2 of Loose and Unscripted for season 4 of the Virtuous Men podcast. We're joined this time with our old friends Ethan and Jared Thomas of Brothers Creed, who are the voices of Meriwether Lewis and William Clark throughout season 4. Welcome, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, appreciate it.
And I think we're all around the country again here tonight. Scott is in Georgia. I'm up in Washington. You guys are in the Carolinas, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So this is
we're all in
a modern miracle.
4 separate screens in 4 separate states. So that's the way it should have been all along.
Yes.
So as we get started, I wanted to ask, are there any projects you guys are currently working on for your podcast?
Yeah, we're actually switching it up this year a little bit. Every month we have 4 episodes generally, and sometimes there's an extra episode, but generally we'll do 1 episode that is an interview. So we've got lots of folks that are interviews coming up. In fact, this next week we've got a guy who is doing the carnivore diet. He only eats meat, so it'll be pretty interesting to meet with him. And we were actually already met with him, but just that episode's very interesting actually. Mm-hmm. The next thing we're doing is movie reviews, which have been really fun. We've done those so far. I think for May we're doing Sisu, right, Ethan?
Yeah, that new Sisu movie that came out.
I am going to be right there to listen to that episode. That was the most fun I've had at the movies all year.
Oh yeah,
yeah, nice. Was so entertaining.
Yeah, we did Super Mario's last, and then before that we did John Wick 4. That was actually mixed reviews, but yeah, we've been enjoying doing that one. And then we're continuing to we'll do like an attribute episode. Like I think the last one we did was hastiness versus like indecisiveness. And then we'll do an episode that is history. So we'll talk about something from history. So
awesome. I love it. You guys are just all over the board covering every single topic you can think of. I love it.
Yeah, all of it aims to building your personal creed.
Yep. At the beginning, it started off as just looking into stuff that we thought was really interesting, and it's kind of continued down that path. And we found out too that other people find things interesting, the same things that we find that are interesting. So
right. Well, cool. Well, as we get into this, into Lewis and Clark, the most important question I want to ask you guys is, okay, Jared first. What was your favorite episode? Put you right on the spot.
Oh man! Well, first I want to say that this miniseries that you guys did was really good. I mean, I know you guys are just 2 guys, but you guys aren't just 2 guys. I mean, this was a work of art. This is like a Hollywood production here. It was really good. I thought that it told the story very beautifully. I mean, this is just as good as any History Channel documentary that there ever was. So I wanted to give you both kudos and commend you both for that. Great job. I mean, I know there's a whole lot of work going into editing these and bringing this out, and you guys aren't even really getting paid to do this. So, I mean, it just speaks to there's like I think there's an underlying virtue there that it's just doing good for the sake of doing good. And I think obviously you guys are trying to grow your stuff, and as you do that, you can dedicate more time. But I mean, this is just great. I just love to see this. So I'll start with that. I think my favorite episode, I don't know, man. Like they're all so different. It's just like all different parts of the journey. I kind of like the last episode because oftentimes we hear about people, just like snapshots of people's lives when they're doing their great thing, And so I thought it's really cool to just see what happened to these people, what went down the line, what Lewis and Clark, the fact that Lewis just really kind of went downhill. And he really lost his mind, sunk into this deep depression, or what was it that Clark called it? States of, I'm trying to remember.
Oh, I think it was Jefferson. Did he call it hypochondriac affections or something like that?
Well, maybe, but and I remember that Lewis or Clark would say like that he realized that Lewis would feel certain ways, like when he was feeling really depressed. And so I found that so interesting that throughout this journey, he was a very adventurous guy. And then at the end, when that adventure was over, it was almost like he had explored. He had seen coast to coast, and he's like, what else is there to explore? And then he kind of spiraled down into, suicide at the end there, which is debatable. Some people debate that.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. Geez.
Hey, this is the loose and unscripted.
That's right. If you haven't already listened, I mean, too late.
So I thought that was cool. Also, like the one guy that was like 99 years lived till he's like 99 years old.
Oh yeah,
and
Patrick
he
Gass.
fought at like was it 89 in World War One? I was like, what? Well, no. It must have been Civil War.
What did he volunteered for the Union in the Civil War, Scott?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when he was 90 years old and he had lost an eye, I think in the War of 1812. So he's 90, he's lost an eye, and he still volunteers for the Union when the Civil War breaks out. I mean,
yeah.
Unbelievable.
Crazy. I mean, how good is that guy? How good is that guy really? But I mean, just for morale's sake only, I'd love to sit around a campfire and hear that guy's stories from the War of 1812 and Lewis and Clark expedition, tell about his adventures and seeing new places. I mean, that would have been wild. So I think the last one.
Good choice. Good choice. I think Scott did a phenomenal job of wrapping up the whole season. It's hard to do because there's just so much there, but yeah, I think you did a great job, Scott. Well done.
Well,
very well done. Yeah.
I feel like the ending is a really important part of every episode. I guess a good way of phrasing it is, so why did you do an episode about these people? And then the ending is kind of a way to sum that up when you realize you kind of look at when you've been on this entire journey, and then you look at it again after everything has happened and after all the men have passed away. So what was all this about? And I feel like the ending of the whole season was kind of like that.
Yeah.
So what about you, Ethan?
Yeah, so I agree with Jared. The last one was a good one, but there's a couple that I really liked. And actually, I wanted to, when we kind of get into it, we'll talk a little bit more about virtues and stuff. I wanted to get into Lewis and kind of the end of his life, and how he was kind of feeling. I had a couple thoughts on that, but I liked, and maybe it's kind of a combination of both. You know, the first episode was kind of like the setup, right? And then I don't think it was till the second episode that they actually took off, right?
Yep. Right at the start of episode 2.
And so I liked episode 2 because it was like, I mean, just the wonder of, they had no idea what they were getting into. I mean, it was like they thought there was giant sloths and like things that they had never seen before.
Woolly mammoths.
Welsh-speaking natives.
I mean, it's just like all this crazy stuff that they were just like, they had no idea what to expect. And then they started going up the river. If I'm remembering correctly, they started going up, and then it was almost like immediately they ran into like extreme hardship, and they were just like, oh man, we don't even like, is the whole thing going to be like this? And so that one for me was just kind of almost a rude awakening. And at the same point, I mean, they knowingly joined this party, the men and Lewis and Clark themselves, knowing that we might not make it back. We might die on this journey. And that is such a foreign idea to us today, that, you know, it's like, I'm going on this journey. I'm not going to have any communication with anyone for the next, you know, or anyone that I love, you know, and I might not ever see them again. You know, you never go on a trip today unless maybe it's to war. And even if you're going to war, you could still call home occasionally and talk to family members and stuff like that. But it's just like, hey, I might be back in a couple years, or I might be dead, you know? And that to me is just astounding. And so it was something that I liked that episode. It was just, it almost seemed like the ball was just barely starting to get rolling. It's like this, you know, the flywheel principle. Things kind of start slowly, but then as they get going, they just pick up speed. And I mean, obviously, you know, the rest of the season, there's just tons of adventures. And what it seems like is that we really only have like a kind of a small glimpse of what happened. I mean, I'm sure there's things that didn't make it into the journals, or large gaps that you know, or other people had experiences and things like that we don't know about. So that's what I liked.
Scott definitely did a phenomenal job setting the whole season up and then wrapping it up.
Yeah, your stuff was adequate, you know.
Mine was adequate, yeah. I just covered, you know,
We don't know, and go prefacing that. I mean, we don't always know who's done which episode. So
Yeah, I don't remember who.
That's
did
true.
It.
Yeah.
Well, doesn't one of you
yeah.
do record it? Does the other one edit it and go through and add in like all the stuff, or just is it solely?
Yeah, we each do our own episode. So
okay.
So if you think of it, I was gonna say, if you think of it like this, it's like a sandwich. You know, you got the bread and the bread for Scott, but then I mean, Jamie, you got everything in the middle is all the good stuff,
the meat,
right?
brother.
So
I did.
Yeah,
I really did. I think I got
I was the outer shell of the Twinkie, and you were the cream filling.
Hey, there you go.
I'll take that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that first episode, like with the mosquitoes that were just so thick, and then he almost Lewis almost fell off a cliff and died. Like the first weekend.
That was and that's another thing too, is that this entire season was a gold mine for jokes, because that's something that I mean, I do it way more than Jamie does it, but typically for the first draft of the episodes, I'll throw some jokes in there, and for this season, I just went all out with the jokes, and it was beautiful. There were so many moments throughout the entire season of my episodes where, I got to put a joke here. It's too good.
Now, so Scott adds them in, and then I listen to the first draft, and then he usually takes most of them out. I think one or two have probably been left in there every now and again.
Well, there was one, or the one that or Jamie, the one that you and I both did. So, Patrick Gass. So obviously every time his name is mentioned, we put a fart sound. When we were going through, there was one. I think it was the 4th episode, Jamie. Where you would actually put jokes in there, which I not expected you to do, because you said, I'm just not going to have time. But you
had a little time, so I had
and you did the fart joke thing for when Patrick Gass's name was mentioned. But on the second draft, you forgot to take one of them out. And it was in the portion where you're talking about how they got really sick from eating the berries and everything, and how it led to a lot of indigestion and diarrhea. And I was wondering, did he intend to leave that in there? Because it's pretty hilarious, and it actually kind of works. So I asked him,
disease.
And I asked him, like, did you mean to put this in here? Like, did you mean to leave this in here? And he was like, oh, shoot, I forgot to take that out.
I thought about leaving it in there. I really did, because it's so perfect.
Yeah,
but I figured it would take away from the seriousness a little bit.
But you said too, though, I mean, there's portions of the episode where you're kind of just really coming to the reality of what these men went through to do what they did. And like, I think facing the elements was obviously probably the largest one. So like when you talk about the mosquitoes, just putting those sound effects together and imagining what that must have been like, and the fact that they could only ward them off by standing in the smoke of their fires and rubbing cow grease on their bodies. Like, it's just, can you imagine doing something like that?
What exactly is cow grease?
Or just like grease left over from the meat,
fat, from the cows,
yeah.
Okay.
That's another thing too that kind of amazes me about that part of their journey with the mosquitoes, is that they didn't catch some kind of disease from them.
Maybe that was one of your other jokes, that at the end you were like, well, all the people died probably from some type of venereal disease that they got along the way from 3 different winters out there.
Yeah.
Right. Oh yeah, that was another thing Jamie pointed out. He said your word for this entire season is excessive fornicating. Like that's like your narration catchphrase for this entire season.
I was gonna say that's one thing that I thought was kind of amazing, is that kind of Lewis and Clark, they both, I guess supposedly, they both kind of abstained from all of that, right? Their men kind of they partook, and there was even times where they went in with the Indians, where the Indians gave them like bed mates, right, which are probably some of the prettiest women in the tribe, and they didn't indulge in that. That was just kind of a test to leadership, really, and it was almost sacrifice, I guess, to the men to say, hey, we're gonna show a good example and be the leaders, right? It's almost a separation.
Yeah, I mean, think of the envy from the man if the two captains they get to go into the nice big teepee with beautiful women, and they're just sitting freezing outside. I mean, think of the envy and the mutiny that would start out of that stuff. So they were probably smart enough to say, no way, we're not going to get caught up in any of that.
I would imagine that they were probably smart enough to know, yeah, there's a chance that we could catch this. And as military officers and captains and the leaders of the expedition, like if we get that and die from it, then it's over.
And wasn't Lewis the doctor, or was Clark the doctor? Kind of
Lewis was the primary doctor, but Clark did have some medical abilities as well that he displayed. If you remember in the 5th episode, where on their journey back, where they go to the Nez Perce, they had barely any supplies to trade. So instead he bartered his medical skills, and then by healing a lot of the members of the tribe with his skills, they were able to stay with them and benefit from them.
Was that when Lewis he kind of made the hot shelter, and then they would go from like the hot rocks and the hot stones into dip into the freezing water and then back and forth?
That was Clark who did that. Yeah, where they made he built a steam bath.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
which is amazing.
That cold exposure, heat and cold exposure, I guess, was a thing back then too.
It's really amazing though. It's amazing though. The way that they did it was really amazing, where they would they would have this tent and they would build a fire and just heat the rocks in the fire, and then they would throw water on it and it would just make steam. And apparently it worked wonders. I mean, it's amazing that they were able to do that with such primitive technology.
But I was gonna say, one thing that I thought was like the most scandalous thing is just like the different tribe traditions that they would run up against. And on the theme of like, these guys having sex with these women, the one tribe where they went up against, and it was like the women would sleep with all of the warriors and then their husband. And so I was like, man, that is so bizarre that I'm sure that just running into these types of cultures and like, oh my gosh, what is this?
Yeah, they were weirded out by that, and then they got to the Northwest, and the Chinook Indians, they would flatten the heads of their children. And I don't think I talked about it in the episode. That was episode 4, but the Corps, you can read it in the journal notes, they were particularly disgusted by that because these kids had like a plank against their head tied super tight to flatten their heads, and they were really disgusted by that. So yeah, they definitely ran into some cultural traditions that they were very put off by.
It also kind of went in the reverse as well. So I remember I can't remember if I mentioned it in the episode, but in one of the pieces of research I did, I think it was when they came to the Nez Perce, and they were very oriented around horses. Like they had more horses than any tribe on the continent. So they were very centered around the horse, and they treated their horses with the utmost respect. And there was one incident, I think, where one of the horses was misbehaving or acting erratically, and one of the men in the Corps whipped it to kind of get it back in line, and was whipping it. And the Indians were just totally appalled by that, seeing one of the men whip the horse. So you sort of have it both ways, where they were disgusted with some of the things the Indians did, and then vice versa. So but that's what's also so amazing about it, is that they were able to kind of see past those things and still have respect for one another.
Yeah, that was the theme of the whole expedition. I mean, so many tribes and very, very little conflict.
One thing I thought was interesting that was kind of like a collision of worlds was they talked about the one tribe that was like a trading tribe, right? They had this huge market from everybody from Canada would come down, and French, English, Canadian, like British. I could just think about how fascinating would that be to be at that market, to go and have no idea what you could see. You can see something you've never seen before. And that's so exciting, Sometimes when I go to like an auction, I'm like, ooh, I could find a treasure or something cool, and there's a little bit of excitement there. But I don't know what it's like to go to like a market and possibly see something that I've never seen before. And I could see something from Europe that I don't even know what that is, or see something that some Indian found in the backwoods somewhere that who knows where it came from, So that just sounded so exciting to me.
Yeah, I think that was the Skaloot tribe. They were kind of on the Columbia River on the way to the coast, and they were big traders, and they actually gave the Corps quite a quite a lot of issues just because they stole so much stuff, and it seemed like it was even meaningless stuff, but it was just how they were. They kind of would help them, and then they'd just go and steal some stuff. I'm like, well, I just helped you, so.
Yeah, well, and that's a really interesting point, is the way that they viewed it. Like, they didn't actually view it as stealing. They simply viewed it as compensation for the help that they gave.
It's like those little guys on Star Wars with like, that have like the things they drive across the desert and they like collect stuff. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Exactly. The parallel is so obvious. Yeah. It's also interesting too, like when they spent the winter of 1804, 1805? I'm getting my timeline mixed up, where they stayed at the Mandan villages, which was who you were talking about, Jared. That's where they stayed, was the Mandan villages, where that was a huge center of trade and international commerce. And during the winter, they had this amazing system where one of the blacksmiths would use his forging tools to make supplies for them, or repair knives and blades and tomahawks, and they would build things for them. And then in turn, the Mandan would give them corn, which was their main diet. And if they didn't have that system worked out, they probably would have died that winter.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's just this great example of these two tribes helping one another with their various areas of expertise and the technology aspect of it as well.
A couple things that one thing that I thought was interesting, kind of as listening through the whole episode, is in growing up, we learned about the Lewis and Clark expedition, and I remember learning about Sacagawea in school and everything else, but I guess I never really quite understood, or maybe I had forgotten how much of a role she actually played in the journey itself. I mean, without her, the whole thing would have fallen apart. Which is kind of cool that they kind of formed this relationship, and it almost felt like, maybe before I listened to you guys' season, it almost felt like she was there out of like obligation, or maybe they said like, you have to come with us, like she was like a prisoner or something like that. But I mean, I guess she was married to one of the guys on the expedition that was kind of trekking with them as well, and it seemed like she enjoyed it, and that she, I mean, enjoyed it to a certain extent, right? As much as you can. But I mean, just one of the stories I thought was just crazy coincidence, maybe not coincidence, but was when they and I can't remember all the names or exact timeline, but whenever they came up to that one tribe, and they were all nervous, and they were thinking that it was going to go bad and all sort of kind of stuff, but then the chief ended up being like her brother or something like that. I mean, what's the likelihood of that? And then it was just like instant acceptance into the group, and love and happiness, and everybody was getting along, as much as the cultures could meld. I just thought that was crazy. And I mean, what luck on Lewis and Clark's part, but also what luck on her part and her brother, that they haven't seen each other in years and years and years and years, because of warring tribes and factions and captures and all this different kind of stuff.
Yeah, so pretty remarkable.
Really cool.
She got kidnapped, and she hadn't seen her brother for years and years, and just the fact that I'm sure she knew they would be going in that general direction, and that they were looking for the Shoshone, but to actually, run into her brother, who is the main guy helping the Corps, and then also she meets the girl who was kidnapped with her and who had escaped before she did. The coincidence, yeah, you're right. I don't think coincidence does it justice. It's much more than that. And you're right. I think she has a really important place in American history, and I think for a good reason. I agree. Before I really delved into the research on her, I had kind of a similar thought that she was on the expedition, but it was more of a, well, you have to go, and the respect shown was just the respect that she was a Native woman who helped the Corps, and that was kind of all there was to it. But yeah, there's so much more. She's mentioned countless times throughout the journals. I think of the time where the canoe turns over and she somehow, while holding her baby, is like grabbing these items and is able to stay, afloat while the boat's tipping over. And
Yeah.
Didn't she save like the majority of the items as compared to
she got
everybody else?
all the small items, all the medicines and stuff. Just, I mean, think about if she hadn't have done that, just that one instance, what a headache it would have been for the captain. So yeah, her contribution was, I think, Scott, I think you mentioned it in episode 5, where I think it's Lewis writing to Charbonneau, and he says, we don't have enough to repay your wife for the contribution she made. Like we couldn't possibly pay her enough. We don't have it within us to pay her enough. She contributed so much.
Yeah, well, that was actually Clark that wrote that. But
that's right. Yeah, Clark was kind of closer to her, right?
Yeah, generally, yeah. And whenever when they divided into 2 separate groups, she went with Clark. And I'm guessing that's probably when they really started to kind of forge their friendship. And he was also really attached to her baby boy, and he even offered to raise him in St. Louis, which was a huge thing for a native boy to have, like an actual proper education. That was unheard of. So it really shows you how much he thought of her.
Wasn't her husband a Frenchman?
Yeah, he was a French fur trapper, and he was kind of not really highly regarded by anybody. So he was simply, I think the only reason that they hired him was because Sacagawea would go with him. So it wasn't that they thought he was anything great, but they knew that she would be essential. So we hire him, he brings her, and we're good.
So in communicating with the Shoshone, remember, so she spoke Shoshone and she spoke Hidatsa. Charbonneau spoke Hidatsa and French. Labiche, who was on the Corps, spoke French and English. So that's how the chain went to translate from Shoshone to English.
So Charbonneau didn't even speak any English?
Probably spoke a little bit, but yeah, not really. He spoke all of his translation was French to one of the guys on the Corps who also spoke French.
I bet the dynamic was weird. Where like you have one guy who's got. Did he have 2 wives, or was it just these one?
He had 2 wives.
I think he had 2. Yeah.
Were they both with him? Was there another woman there too?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think Sacagawea was the only one.
Yeah,
they didn't.
She must have stayed with the Mandans the whole time.
So he's got. Yeah, so that's kind of a weird power. Like he's got the wife, he gets the separate quarters, he gets, he gets to make a baby during this thing, and like everybody else, kind of, I don't know. I feel like if this guy wasn't really liked anyway, and these guys are like desperate for women, that might be like, I could see how he would attract some ire. Like,
maybe that's why Charbonneau was so unpopular.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, all right, you guys have fun in your bunk tonight. I'm going to go to my bed with my wife. Guy, man.
Mm-hmm. And it is truly amazing, though, that nothing happened between the members of the Corps and Sacagawea.
Yeah.
I think, and that is an undying testament to the brilliance of Lewis and Clark and their leadership, because they of course knew that if there's a woman in the group, then that is instantly going to create some kind of problem or a potential problem with some of the men. And it could lead to something even worse. It could lead to rape for all they know. Yeah. So not only is she already married and has a husband, so that kind of, it's not like she's just kind of there by herself and she doesn't really have anybody, but the fact that they go to all the trouble to make separate quarters for her away from the other men. And I think, I don't think it was in Fort Clatsop where they did this, but on their way to Fort Clatsop, the captains stayed in their tent together with them for that much more protection, because none of the men would dare mess with her if the captains are there.
Yeah.
So it's like they went out of their way to protect her, which is pretty remarkable given the fact that they were in such difficult circumstances.
Yeah, they didn't want to get 100 lashes from Lewis again.
Yeah. Oh. For 4 nights in a row. Oh,
that's like the worst. Just, I don't know how you could survive that, for one thing. Like, I don't know, because when we think of lashes, we think of, a cat of 9 tails just tearing your flesh off. So I'm guessing it was more just
belt.
It was more like
Lewis got his belt off.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
It makes you wonder what the character of Charbonneau was, like, was he a jealous man? Was he like very protective, or was he very like possessive of his wife? I think that his character would really be interesting to see in a dynamic of how. I can't imagine he was very possessive of her because he allowed her to go do all this stuff and really allowed her to flourish. Some men would be like, I'm here, I can speak these languages, I'll do it. But I think the fact that he really allowed her to do that when maybe she was almost seen as like property to him, maybe that speaks a little bit to his character and that he wasn't possessive. Maybe he was a better man than you would initially think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's probably the case with all of the men is that we the only thing we really have to go on is the journals.
Yeah.
But if
Right.
you were actually there with them, you'd probably look at them differently.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about the lines that you guys read. Personally, I think my favorite Ethan quote from Lewis was it was in episode 3. So they're just getting to the Shoshone village. They have a great time. They get all their plans sorted to get over the Rockies, and then Lewis has this just incredible quote about his 31st birthday, and he feels as if he hasn't accomplished anything. And you're just like, wait, what? You've done all of this in your life prior to the expedition. You've got all of the men here. They've all survived except for Floyd, who had a burst appendix. Most likely, they couldn't have saved him anyway. And yet he just feels inadequate, like he's accomplished nothing. And I also thought it was really cool that he mentions he wanted to have something from his life benefit the next generation. So yeah, just an incredible quote from him, and I thought, Ethan, you read it perfectly. Like, you got the mood perfect, and it just flowed so well with the episode. So very well done on that one.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, that was a great quote. Yeah, I read that one a whole bunch of times, and I even like wrote down some of it for me personally because I just like quotes, and they kind of inspire me. I'm just like, yeah, and one thing too, me being 33 years old as well, kind of in that same age range. It's like, man, it hit close to home. It's like, what am I doing to prepare?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
It says something too about his state of mind that he was very clearly someone who struggled with depression. I don't think anybody would ever deny that, but the fact that he has accomplished more at age 30 than dozens of men would ever hope to achieve in their lifetimes, and yet he still feels that he hasn't done enough. It's pretty remarkable looking at it now.
What do you think? Maybe they thought they were just on some wild goose chase out in the middle of the woods that his buddy President Jefferson sent him on. I mean, maybe that's how they viewed it at first, and then now, because it was successful, we've kind of immortalized that in our American culture and history. That, man, these guys are great because we love every country loves great hero stories, and so we've kind of immortalized these guys.
And then Jared, so your favorite quote of mine was I was kind of torn between your ocean in view quote where they make it to the Pacific in episode 4, and then episode 5 where you're reading it's Clark's letter that he writes upon Lewis's death. I thought probably that one is my favorite, just because the way you read it, you can feel just his anguish that his friend is dead, and it's almost like he kind of expected it, just because Lewis had been so depressed and had so much turmoil in his life. But yeah, I think you got the mood perfect for that one, and it fit perfectly within Scott's ending. So well done to you on that one.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually the one I remember too. It's just like, these guys are brothers, man. That they were through the thick and thin of it, and they were, when you're near death with someone. I mean, that's enough trauma bonding to make you brothers. And
Exactly.
these guys were so close, and so I remember at the end when he had met up with Lewis, or he had talked to him somehow, and he was I think he met up with them, and he was like trying to cheer him up and something, and he's just like, man, I hate to leave Lewis in this state of being so sad. And I just kind of, I just thought of my relationship with my brother Ethan, and that's just like, man, like I can't imagine how sad that would be to see your brother, someone so close to you, in just such a bad state. Trying to cheer him up and trying to say, "Hey, you're doing a great job. We did this thing," and Lewis is like, "Oh man, my life's a failure. Everything I've done is a failure," and just trying to reminisce and try to get up his spirits, but at the same time being like, "It's not working. Like, there's nothing I can do here," and I just feel horrible that my best buddy, or in this case, nearly his brother, was so sad. So definitely, hit home for me.
Yeah, and that was the last time he saw him.
Yeah, one thing for me, and especially in that last episode when we're kind of you can tell that Lewis is kind of spiraling, right? And it's post journey and he's spiraling, and to me, I almost got the impression of like that before, and obviously he struggled with depression throughout the whole thing and everything else, but it seemed like before and during the expedition, he was just strong. He was a powerhouse. He was a leader. He was, he gave direction and knew what he was doing. He had a goal and he had a mission. But then once that was kind of over, it almost seemed like it was I don't know, to me, it was a travesty, an example of maybe like a man without a mission or a man with idle hands. It just kind of has a potential of falling in depression. He didn't have a goal. He didn't have something to keep him busy. It reminds me of some people retire, or they stop working, and then they die quickly. Just because they just kind of lose motivation or desire to do things because they're just idle. And so that, for me, it was just like, it's just staying busy, having a goal, whether it's a personal goal of I want to do this year, or financial goal, or whatever it might be, but something that's always kind of keeps your eyes on the horizon, was something that I took away from Lewis's experience. And like, hey, sometimes if you just kind of, I don't know, if you lose sight of what your mission is, then you can lose sight of everything. And I thought it was interesting too, kind of an anecdote to that. When he committed suicide, he shot himself twice.
Once in the heart, once in the head.
Yeah, in the head and in the chest. I was like, that's weird, but interesting.
Unorthodox for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the main reason, right? Yeah, that's the main reason why people doubt it, right? Because they're like, well, how do you do that? How do you?
And the innkeepers didn't find him until the next day or something like that. Like, they didn't hear it or something.
And she heard all these shouts, and there's a lot of weird things surrounding that. I don't know. I guess we'll never know, but certainly is a good story for a lot of debate, a lot of controversy.
It's definitely true, though. Like what you were saying, though, it's definitely true that you look at everything that he had on the mission, and then it was all taken away when they got back, and then the new roles that he's given are roles that he was not really well suited for. But you can sort of blame Jefferson for that, but at the same time you can't really, because you sort of look at where Jefferson's coming from. He's the one who authored the expedition in the first place, so he still has expectations for Lewis. And he probably thought that, if I make him governor or give him a political position, that's a pretty high honor. And that's probably where he's coming from. I'm giving you these great honors. And I think in Stephen Ambrose's book, Undaunted Courage, which is, I think, the best-selling book about the Lewis and Clark expedition, he phrased it perfectly where he said, Lewis was a brilliant military man, but a terrible politician. And you see that in that course of his life, where he's given a more political role, and you can see that it's not who he is. And it was just like I said in the episode, it was a recipe for disaster.
Something at the very beginning that I loved was when Lewis wrote the letter to Clark. It was kind of like the invitation of him to come on this journey with him. And he was just like, there would be nothing more that would please me for you to come on this journey. Like, I'll make it worth your while. You can leave anytime you want. I'll schedule it.
Yeah,
It's just
part.
like anything you want, please come with me. And it was almost like he didn't know if he would say yes. But then Clark's answer was like, yes, I'm there. I'll do it. Let's go. Like I'm all in. I support you. If you're the man that's inviting me, then I'm all in. And that it was just like a precursor, beginning insight into kind of the relationship that they had already formed beforehand, and that kind of moving forward. And I'm sure it just grew even deeper and deeper and deeper through this whole journey.
I mean, wouldn't it be cool to have a friend who you could write a letter to and invite him on this incredibly dangerous expedition? He's probably going to die, there's no guarantees he'll come back, and you haven't seen him in a couple years, and he just says yes. I mean, that's a brotherhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really gives you, it definitely provides some insight into the kind of bond they had where they could go years without contact, and Clark still says, yeah, absolutely. And you sort of get this impression too, like you touched on it, Jared, where you sort of get the sense that Lewis almost wants him along for his friendship as opposed to his military abilities, which clearly he had those, but you almost get the sense that I just want you around because I like you. Like I just want you with me. I want you to be near me.
And he complimented his skill sets, and he was aware enough to know that.
Right. Yeah. And that's one thing to Lewis's credit is that he really gave credit where it was due, and he took care of his men, even after they got back. And there was a lot of political infighting over the ownership of the journals or seeing that they got paid accordingly. Like Lewis was like when he was in his element as a friend, Lewis was the sort of guy you would want as a friend.
Yeah.
Despite his alcoholism and depression and tendency toward melancholy, aside from that.
Yeah, and that's why he needed Clark.
Yeah, it's almost like Lewis, you sort of get the feeling too that Lewis was really aware of these faults in himself and his ability to just spiral downward. And you also sort of get the impression that he wanted Clark around to pull him back out of that. Because I really think that had Clark not been there, there's no way the expedition would have succeeded. I think just having Clark with him was enough to guarantee the success of the mission, just because Lewis was well aware that I need you to keep me grounded.
Makes you wonder how, when they broke off into separate paths twice, one's on the way there and then one's on the way back. Maybe the guys who were just with Lewis, they're like, oh man, maybe they were like this guy for the next few weeks, months.
It's always depression this and melancholy that. And are we there yet?
I think very much Lewis was a guy of extremes. He was either like in the pits of depression and just hating life, and then he was just in the highs of let's go here and we're going to go explore this and check this out. And I think he had that just I don't know, swashbuckling attitude of let's just go do this. And then, as you say, Clark had the more structure. He was the structure in the expedition, whereas Lewis was the vision. And they they worked perfectly together. And in any good project, I think you need both of those.
And that's one thing I like about Clark too, is that he seems like a very laid back individual. You sort of get the sense that he just kind of took things as they came. Like, oh, I didn't I'm not a captain, I'm a lieutenant. Okay, big deal. or Lewis almost burned down a village because he had some stuff stolen. Okay, I'll talk to him about it and then we'll move on. You just get the sense that nothing really fazed him, I mean, obviously things did. I mean, you could not be in situations like that and not be fazed, obviously, but you just kind of get the sense that he just took things in stride and he just didn't really see it as this big gigantic thing like Lewis did. Like, it's just, okay, we got a hardship, we'll get over it. We're a team where we're going to work together. Whereas Lewis is just, oh man, this is the end.
Yeah. Well, I learned there's two major things I took out of y'all's this whole season. So I I want to share those before we run out of time here. But one of them is that, we call this the Lewis and Clark expedition, but I think that it's so much more than that. It's almost just like the story of how Americans mapped America. I mean, it's almost like Lewis and Clark, they were there, but it's like it was the Indian tribes that, and multiple occasions, that kept them alive. It was Sacagawea. It was some Indian tribe letting them horses or giving them food. And so we've always, I think sometimes we simplify history, and that we say, this was Lewis and Clark's thing. And then we're like, oh, and Sacagawea too. But like really, like all these benevolent tribes along the way, all the tribes that didn't, just even if they weren't benevolent, but they didn't kill them. I mean, it's like every single one of them is part of this story. And so I feel like it's truly an American story because everybody helped. And it wasn't just these two guys. And you kind of think about that in the context of our lives too. And how, maybe we think we're just we can do everything. Oftentimes men especially will think I can do everything on my own. I'm a lone wolf. There's a lot of that mentality right now. But really, it's not just you. Everybody around you can affect you, and they can save you sometimes. Sometimes you'll be at the, just starving to death and stumbling into a town, and then someone picks you up and says, "Hey, here's some food." Like it oftentimes happen in the story. And so sometimes I think as men, we need to be humble enough to accept help, and that will help us along our journey. And that kind of goes along with the next theme that I really took out of this is, if you kind of look at it more from like almost like a faith perspective, and that the amount of faith these guys had to have to go through this. I mean, I don't know if they expected from the beginning that they would be able to cross the entire country without any help. I don't know if that was their expectation, but it clearly did not go out that way. Did not, end that way. And so they needed help all along the way in many critical points. And so it's almost like they had to learn to walk with faith that things would come, that things would be good. Now, and I feel like that's a lot of times with the path that we all walk, is that sometimes we don't know what's going to be down the road, but we just have to walk with faith that we're doing the right things we need to be doing. And then hopefully the good consequences will follow. I mean, obviously, with a lot of these guys, some bad consequences follow. Like, sleeping with some of the Indian women. Well, you're going to have syphilis for the next, 6 years or whatever. So, I mean, those made the situation worse. But so in some cases, we can make our lives worse by the decisions that we make. But if we're just generally trying to do right, be good men, be good fathers, and walk with God, if that's who you want to walk with, then I think that we'll be guided, and we'll be guided to where we want to go. And our goal, if we know our goals and we have that rudder set, like Ethan was talking about earlier, if we don't have a goal, then we're just going to be aimlessly going around. So if we have that goal, then we just have the faith to get there, to start walking, just like Lewis and Clark, we'll get there.
Yeah, that is very much the American mindset that took hold, I think, after the Lewis and Clark expedition, after they got back and everyone started to move west. Obviously, there's the tragedy of what happened to the Indian nations. But I think the good thing that we can take out of that is, like you covered it in episode 5, Scott, just all these people collectively saying, hey, there's something out there. I mean, these guys just came back and they didn't die. They found something amazing out there. Let's go see it. These cities are getting too crowded. Let's move west and see what we can make of ourselves. And yeah, there's just I think that's a great American spirit to take out of it. You're right.
Yeah, I think it was. I don't know if any of you have seen the Men Who Built America series, and the one that was specifically about frontiersmen. And they talk a little bit about Lewis and Clark there, but one of the historians they interviewed said, he summed it up so perfectly, where he said, the frontier is in America's DNA. Like, the frontier is how we define ourselves. Like, the actual frontier doesn't exist anymore, but the spirit of the frontier still is very much alive in the way that we define ourselves as a country, for better or worse.
You're forgetting space, which is the final frontier.
That's right on.
Yeah.
Right. I was going to say that, but you beat me to it. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got Elon Musk for that, right?
That's right. Captain
What
Lewis
about
and Captain Kirk.
what about you, Ethan? What did you kind of take away from this season and just kind of the story of Lewis and Clark and the
Yeah.
whole crew?
For me, it was that you don't have to face challenges alone. That finding the right partner, whether that be business partner, whether that be partner in life, or whatever it is, I think finding the right partner is good. Someone that supports you and loves you and is willing to say heck yes whenever you send the invitation. That was something that really affected me, and just the challenge. I mean, these guys, they did not know what to expect. I mean, sometimes in life, in our modern comfortability that we live in, we are so risk averse, and we're scared to take risks, whether it's financially or in life, or a job or a house or an investment, or having kids or whatever it might be. We're like, I don't know. I can watch a million YouTube videos on it nowadays to see what it's like, but I mean, they were truly going into the unknown, and that is very admirable. And if they can do something like that, then what risks in my life can I be willing to take? And I would say for them that, not just for them, I would say for us, that risk was worth it. And just the growth and development that we received as a country, and just the history that it built for future generations, that for me, what actions, what are we doing, what am I doing that is going to build the same type of legacy in future generations, not just for my kids, but for the community, for my church, for my extended family. And so it really made me think, and I'm still thinking on, am I ready to go? Am I strong enough to go into the fray, if it will?
Yeah, I think one thing it made me think of, I read this quote this week, and it was a great timing. It made me think of the expedition, and the fact that all of these men came together and they realized their need for each other. It's actually from a book called The Friendless American Male, and it kind of talks about the friendlessness and the loneliness that's kind of an epidemic within 20s to 40s men in this country. And the quote is, one serious problem is the friendless condition of the average American male, and it's that men find it hard to accept that they need the fellowship of other men. Imagine if the Corps of Discovery would have had that mindset, and they're like, no, I can do this by myself, or I can do this part by myself. They surely would have never made it to the Mandan villages, never mind to the Pacific and back. So I think it's a lesson for us. I think loneliness in middle age to 20s to 40s, even beyond that, it's a huge issue. And I think we would be smart to appreciate the need that we all have for male friendships. And if you don't have any, go get some. I know it's hard making friends, so to speak, when you're older, you're not in school, but it's necessary, and it can literally save your life, as it did with the Corps. So I think that's the main message I take from it, is everyone needs a band of brothers. No matter what you need, man, you can call for the big things and the little things. So yeah, just a message of encouragement to all men to not forsake that in your life.
Amen, brother.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate you guys and how we've become friends over Zoom. And I hope, Scott, you get to go meet these guys real soon.
One
Yeah.
That's
day.
true. That's true. It'll happen. Whether you want it to or not, it'll happen.
we'll get some
Just
barbecue
gotta
or
find
something.
Like now, if I could just find where they live.
Hey, I'll give you my number and you can text me, and then we'll have you over, and my wife will make you a home cooked meal.
Yes.
Look at that.
That's what I'm talking about. Haven't had one of those in far too long.
Hey, it'll be good.
Will it be a recipe from the Lewis and Clark cookbook?
Hey, whatever you want.
Yeah. Let's see.
Some
Let's
woolly
see,
mammoth.
boiled elk and crushed rattlesnake rattles, and
Oh gosh,
there's got to be something else.
No,
Yeah.
is
Possum.
Yeah,
probably
right.
one of those snakes that gobbled like a turkey.
Oh yeah. Oh, I had such a great joke there that I wasn't able to put in. Oh man. Like at that point I was getting way too overloaded with jokes, and I just thought Jamie's not even gonna laugh anymore. Like I gotta
I was starting to wonder, like, what does Scott spend more time on, the jokes or the actual episode?
Although, to be fair, I did the jokes like months in advance before we actually recorded anything, so I had them all ready to go. So I actually did
dedicated.
I actually did the necessary work.
We're gonna have to
just do it in episodes,
go ahead.
a joke episodes.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, we have to come out with a Scott's gags episode, and we just show all of your various jokes. It would be a long episode. You've had so many, so.
Right, and filled with copyright infringements.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Well, guys, it's been a pleasure as always. I really appreciate you guys not just joining us tonight, but I know it took a long time to read all of those quotes. It was pages and pages of quotes for the season. We really appreciate it, and I think it really added to our overall season. It wouldn't have been as good without the quotes from you guys, so thank you very much.
Thank you for the invite. It's great to be a part of something so cool what you guys are doing.
Yeah, and listeners, if you want to check these guys out, it's at a Brothers Creed, wherever you listen to podcasts. Look for the yellow graphic with the two hands in a manly shake. And you guys are on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, everything, right?
Pretty much. We don't do anything on Twitter, but we're pretty big on Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah, anywhere you listen to podcasts, we'll be there.
All right. Well, thank you guys, and we'll get together soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to Part 2 of Loose and Unscripted. This marks the end of Season 4. If you enjoyed this season, please share the episodes with a friend, and if you'd like to see this podcast grow and take on even more challenging topics in the future, you can help us by leaving a review on Apple Podcast and subscribing to our YouTube page. We'd also love to hear your questions and comments. Drop us a DM on our Instagram page, or you can email us directly at virtuousmanpod@gmail.com. That's virtuousmanpod. After a summer break, Virtuous Men will return in the fall for more stories of virtue to inspire you to keep living the virtuous life.